Well, we're lucky enough to get Derrick back with us. It's been, I know pretty boring around here lately, right, Matt?
Just the usual July dead period in the NFL, right?
Right? I mean, who knew $500 million deal was going to come down? I don't even know where to begin. I did the timeline thing yesterday. I took the little bit of information we got at first, I laid it out there, and then we went to the next one and the next one. After having 20 some odd hours to reflect on it, what's your takeaway at this point, just overall?
Well, I think it's, the Chiefs have got the certainty with their franchise quarterback for 12 years that they know what's going to happen and they can plan everything else around it. This has been the one piece that they needed to take care of that allows them to take care of everything else and to go on. And one of the things we heard from Brett Veach today was just that was an important part of the deal for them, was just getting the numbers to it. And I don't think that he was intending to allude to anything else, but I thought it was really telling when he just talked about the fact that you don't want a deal like this to get into the last year of the contract or franchise tags, and then it gets contentious. Mm-hmm. That it was important for them to get it wrapped up right now. Don't know if he's alluding to anything else going on in his world, but specific to this. But now the Chiefs know how much it's going to cost over the next 12 years. And not that they can't move the money around. This deal is built to move money around. Mm-hmm. But now they know just what money is going to spend. They can determine and change a little bit about where it goes and what year. But now they know what they're going to pay their franchise quarterback for the next decade plus.
And that was the question yesterday until later in the day when we got the specifics. But first of all, the grandeur of it all. I was pretty shocked. Not only they got it done, I really expected this to be another year-long process, but 10-year extension, does the length surprise you?
It does, just because, the longest that I'd ever heard any years associated with this was maybe 7, and that was a while ago. And even number-wise, started with a 2 was, I think a lot of people, at least that I talked to, was expecting. Not much less getting to a 3 or a 4 and then getting into double-digit years. But I think it speaks to 2 things. One is that it certainly speaks to Patrick Mahomes making a commitment to Kansas City. I mean, this is him saying that he wants to be the franchise quarterback in this town for his entire career. I think that's a big statement. And the second part of it is that the Chiefs are willing to make the commitment that they're, this is what they're ready to do, and that they know that it's going to cost them. Remember, $45 million per. I know some people are saying that Pete left some money on the table. The next highest paid quarterback out there is getting $35 million per. This is not that. So it's a whole other level. So, but at the same time, I do think that both sides wanted to send a statement. I think that the Mahomes, especially with his representation, they wanted this to be the biggest contract in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And I think the Chiefs kind of wanted that too. We hear talk now from Brett Veach talking about, Brant Tillis coming into his office in 2018 and talking about a baseball contract. The Chiefs, I think that they knew what they had, and they're like, hey, we're going to make a splash and sign Patrick Mahomes. We might as well make it the biggest splash that we can.
Right. And man, there's a lot there. I agree with you. Like, I think for the player, there's always that thing. We see everybody kind of leapfrog, whether it's just guaranteed or total average contract, but specifically for him to say this is the biggest contract in the NFL, it's the biggest contract in American sports, North American sports. Sorry, Canadians, I appreciate you too. But that goes that extra mile, right? The contract we'll talk about in the next segment, the specifics, but just being the guy at the top of the heap across sport in general, I think really not only helps Patrick for that accolade, but it puts the Chiefs on the map for maybe people who don't pay attention to American football that much. It takes it outside of that scope, I think.
Yeah, and and unfortunately we didn't get into that topic today with Brett Veach, but I think it's a great question to ask, and to Clark Hunt as well, if hey, that some of this contract and making it as big as it was is part of that, because let's be real. The Chiefs view Patrick Mahomes as not just their face of the NFL and their way into more American homes. They view Patrick Mahomes as their entry into the world That's why it was such a big deal for them to go to Mexico City. I think that they want to play more international games in the next few years because they realize, Clark Hunt realizes that the NFL has an untapped market overseas, and the NFL is trying to grow that brand. And they view Patrick Mahomes as being a guy who can position himself as the face of the NFL throughout the world, not just in this country.
Well, and Clark would be in a position to know that. Not only he's on the finance committee now, he's definitely on the international committee. He's got ties to other businesses in other countries as well as other sports. I think for me, what also ties into that is yesterday, I had all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork, comments on this channel, on the podcast, everywhere. He was trending top 10 in UK Twitter. He was all over television in Germany. I think that's exactly where it's going. And the league's bigger goal of globalization might ride on the back of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and we're talking about a 24-year-old kid in third year in the league, second year as a starter, and the NFL already acknowledging him as essentially the face of the league and the face of the brand. And, it certainly helps that he's got all the other characteristics that you want in the leader of a brand. I mean, he's charismatic, he's humble, he's a good guy. People have good relationships with him. I mean, there's a reason why that, Patrick Mahomes is getting moved up to the front. And I like I said, I don't think that was the primary purpose of this deal and just the reality of the size of it. I think that there were legitimate business reasons that went into a lot of this. But, knowing how much Clark Hunt was involved in this deal, yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that, that certainly part of this deal is just the splash that it makes and that it does raise Patrick Mahomes and, as of course, the Chiefs' profile.
And I think to that end, we got a little bit of a glimpse of the inside workings of the other guys. Terry Bradway, I think, was mentioned. Brad Tillis was mentioned. Certainly, one comment that stood out to me was just how involved. I've always considered, and I think we've seen that version of Clark Hunt that seems to be a bit removed. He lives in Dallas. He's not a day-to-day kind of owner. He's certainly not Jerry Jones, maybe the antithesis. But for Brett Veach to come out and say, if we had a question, we would ask him and he was right there with a response. I mean, clearly that's an all hands on deck going in one direction, but did that catch you by surprise?
No, it didn't. I mean, I think that there is a little bit of perception that because, Clark Hunt's based in Dallas and he's not here all the time, that maybe he's not as hands-on as maybe some other owners are. But he's pretty hands-on. I mean, he stops in Kansas City quite a bit. They run a lot of things by him. And certainly, I mean, you're going to spend $450 million of the man's money. He's going to have a voice in it. But no, I mean, I think Clark is a lot more involved than probably people do give him credit for. But at the same time, he lets his people do their thing. They're not going to make a move without his permission. And sometimes I know that they say that he's offered them helpful advice and, maybe they've done things a little bit differently after they've run it by him. But you know what? He's hired three people, and Andy Reid, Brett Veach, and Mark Donovan, that he trusts to run their side of the business, their silos. And when they come to him with issues, they know that he can fix it. I mean, he has that kind of reputation. But he's not afraid to wet his beak into any part of the business if he needs to. And this was obviously, this doesn't get done without him because it's his name on the check.
Yeah, right. He's the guy with that signature. So as we look at the structure of the deal, yes, the number is incredible. It's not going to be topped for a long time. One of the things that stood out to me, and I put up right away, is the fact that the cap number stays under that of Russell Wilson for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And that the way that they structured it, can you speak to how they got that done and the bonus situation, how this thing works? It seems like it's really complicated.
It is pretty complicated. And, and it was really set up, because they could have done a lot of different things. I mean, they could have absolutely changed it to get Patrick Mahomes more money right now in the form of either some higher base salary in the next couple of seasons, bigger, bonus, since he's only getting $10 million as a signing bonus right now. But keeping the cap number consistent and low for the next 2 years was really key. Because they don't have a lot of cap room right now in this for 2020 and don't have a lot of room for 2021. And that's not even knowing what the salary cap is going to be in 2021. And Brett Veach even acknowledged, no one knows what's going to happen. And, it could be a lower cap number next year. You get into 2022, and that's when it starts to creep up. Yeah, 31 million is a big number, but you're right. It's not quite a Russell Wilson number, and it's a reasonable number, if not even underpriced for an MVP quarterback. So for the next 3 seasons, it's manageable, and it allows the Chiefs to do what they want to do as far as keeping the core veterans together, the guys on offense, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, keeping your tackles together, keeping your guys on defense. Now, the big question out there is still going to be Chris Jones, and that's a whole other question. But, hey, getting Patrick Mahomes done doesn't hurt at all when it comes to getting something done with Chris Jones if you want to. That, if anything, it makes it easier. It doesn't make it necessarily more likely, but it makes it easier from the Chiefs' standpoint. When you get into down the road, that's the tricky thing because, with the guarantees that the way they are and these rolling guarantees, basically each year is going to guarantee the season following. So, essentially all this money is guaranteed, but it's not going to become guaranteed until basically a year out. Mm-hmm. And the catch there is that, not that the Chiefs are going to walk away from Patrick Mahomes, but it's impossible for them to walk away from Patrick Mahomes without a day of reckoning. Because at any point, if they decided that, that they wanted to get away from this deal, especially once you get 3-4 seasons in, once you pass that deadline for the guarantee, you're going to have these $38.9 million contracts guaranteed that you're not getting out of. Yeah. So to a degree, it's set up that neither side can really get out of it, and certainly not the Chiefs. Now, what it's done is that with these basically roster bonuses paying the bulk of the salary, is that it really gives them the opportunity to move that money around and change things if they want to. So that's why I fully expect. I don't think that this is going to be the last contract that Patrick Mahomes signs for between now and 2031. It wouldn't surprise me if this deal gets reworked 3 or 4 times or more. Yeah. And that's the expectation on both sides. They both understand that this deal is probably going to be reworked. But what was important for the Chiefs to do was just get a firm number, a number that they know, okay, you know what, over 10 years, we're going to give Patrick Mahomes $450 million. If we need to move some of that money around so that we're maybe paying him more one year and less another, that's fine. But now that they just know a number, that's what they can account for and they can plan. Moving it around is no problem at all.
Especially because it isn't a huge bonus that's prorated that you really can't do much with. This leaves them the flexibility. I personally feel, and this is my next question to you, the huge payout, I think it's 2027, means to me that at the very minimum, this deal gets either torn up and redone or extended by 2026 in order to avoid that $60 million cap number.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to look at it because you're right. I mean, and when we talk about NFL contracts and we hear that they're 4 years, they're almost never a 4-year contract. Usually it's basically a 2 or a 3-year contract with an opt-out. And even this year, in this year's free agency, we saw a lot of 4-year contracts with 1-year opt-outs. Mm-hmm. This one, you're right. I mean, basically, there's after year 3, which is going after the 2024 season, going into 2025. In 2025 is going to guarantee for 2026 that when it's the first big guarantee is going to kick in, and that I mean. I could see this as being a 3-year deal that you renegotiate after 2024 and start moving some money around. It could also be a 5-year that you go through before you start moving some money around. But you're right. I mean, 2027, when you've got that $59.95 million cap number, I don't expect that the Chiefs are going to absorb that. But at the same time, I mean, you're going to have to put that money somewhere. So. Well, even if the Chiefs had to eat this whole thing and pay it as it is, it's actually set up that they could do that.
Yeah, it's incremental enough. But even with normal growth of the cap, 2027, we're talking maybe the caps, if it goes the way it has, if it recovers from this season, we're talking 260, 280 for normal growth. That's still like 23% of the cap at that 60 number. So, yeah, it certainly could work, but I don't think that that's the way that it's going to come down. I think we agree on that. The bigger thing for me, and obviously we don't have to get into it today, this is about Patrick Mahomes, but like you said earlier, It actually, I think, makes it easier now to get the big issue out of the plate. You know what the foundational salary is for your biggest player. Do you think this makes it easier to negotiate and actually get something done with Chris Jones?
I don't know if I use the word easier. I mean, I guess you could say that, but the problem with Chris Jones was never going to be Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with the Chris Jones contract is always going to be Chris Jones. I mean, that's just the issue. How much you paid Mahomes wasn't really going to affect Jones, and this deal, shows it. I mean, they didn't really do anything to move around money for the next 2 seasons. If anything, you've freed up a little bit of money in 2022. So if you've got a deal with Chris Jones that's going to cover 3 or 4 years, you can accommodate that. But it's still going to come down to whether or not these two sides can agree on anything. And at this point, we just haven't seen that. Now, hey, I'll take an L because I did not think that the Chiefs were going to get this deal done with Mahomes before the season started. Yeah. And so I've been saying I don't think they're going to get a deal done with Chris Jones. I could be wrong on that too. But it would still be knock me over with a feather if those two sides get anything done, because at least with Mahomes, we had some sound. We had a little bit of rumblings about negotiations going on. Mm-hmm. With Chris Jones, it's been radio silence.
Yeah. And I think the difference is that Mahomes clearly, and he said it today, has been very specific in wanting to stay here for his career. And I think he knew that pretty early on. And clearly the team, as we heard today, has been planning since before he was the starter about how they were going to extend him. They thought it was going to be the standard quarterback money, $30 million a year. Oh, it sounds like such a pittance right now. But both sides have clearly been working towards this. And I said it on yesterday's podcast, but I do feel like if this wasn't a team that was that focused on the future and a player that was that open to the future, and like Brett said many times today, mature for his age, I don't feel like this small market team in the middle of the Midwest really would have been able to do this if they weren't all specifically focused on the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, I mean, the way that this came about is pretty amazing, because I think the only way this comes about is that you've got all of these people involved. Because I think part of, obviously, Patrick Mahomes falling in love with Kansas City, it's a great town, it's a great fan base, all those things. He fell in love with Andy Reid too. Yeah. So the fact that you've got an absolutely perfect pairing between coach and quarterback helps out there. The fact that, and all three of these guys today talked about trust and the fact that they trust each other. And then you throw in the relationship between Brett Veach and Chris Cabot, the agent for Patrick Mahomes. There's trust there too. So you put all of this together, and you had every group involved in this wanted the same thing, So I think that certainly made all of it easier, just the relationship that all these people have with each other. And hey, you certainly hope over the next 12 years nothing changes. And I have no reason to believe that it will. These groups all seem like they truly respect each other, and I don't think that we see anything remotely suggesting that anything's going to sour between Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. But I don't know if this happens with any other team, because I don't know if any other team's got an Andy Reid and a Brett Veach.
And that's exactly how I feel too, to the point where I thought one of the funnier moments, and we'll finish on the two guys that I think really reap the benefits of this. And that is Andy Reid did not put out the question of coaching into his 70s today. I thought that was significant, something that I thought for a while, but to hear him say it, does that reassure you, or is that a little bit of flowery talk and, attaboy Herbie?
Yeah. I mean, if anybody's going to be a lifer head coach in the NFL, I mean, Andy Reid could be that guy. So it would not surprise me. But, at the end of this deal with Mahomes, he'll be 74. I mean, that's up there. I mean, but Bill Belichick is 68, 69. Yeah. I mean, and he seems like he's, older than dirt. So, I mean, getting up there at 74, it's hard to be on the cutting edge, and Andy Reid still is. So I think part of it is, I think it's going to depend on a lot of different factors. I mean, it's going to depend on how he feels. It's going to depend on if he's still got the energy to do it, if he feels he can still be on the cutting edge. I mean, I was asked this earlier, and I would say I'd probably put the over under on the number of years that I think Andy Reid will coach at 8. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard to see going the under. I'd probably still bet the over, But at the same time, I mean, Andy Reid's a different guy than he was a few years ago. I mean, you've seen it. I mean, the Super Bowl certainly seems to have mellowed him a little bit. He seems to be certainly enjoying himself, and he's a little bit more lighthearted. You've heard just that in the last few years that, and I think Mahomes being a big part of it, that he just enjoys his job more. He loves coaching. He loves all of that. But then at the same time, I mean, he's a grandfather now. There's other things that are going on. I think it's too early to say what he's going to do. I don't think he knows what he's going to do, but I do know that the fire's still burning. I mean, that guy does not, certainly I think that retirement's on the horizon. So I don't think it's around the corner, but I still think it would be in the best interest of probably the Chiefs as far as their long-term future if the, successor to Andy Reid got to coach Patrick Mahomes and be kind of a bridge and let Mahomes be the bridge to the next generation of Chiefs. But you know what? Win as many as you can. And if Andy Reid's still winning Super Bowls in 10 years, he's not going anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Pete Carroll, watch out.
Exactly.
You might give up a record. The two other people that I think really made out in this and reap the benefits of Chris Cabot off the top, I think has really made a mark for him. I know he's been very well thought of for years, but this really sets him apart, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, it's obviously the biggest deal in sports, and for both the representatives for Patrick Mahomes, Chris Cabot, and Lee Steinberg. For Steinberg, this is really a bit of a comeback. I mean, he's been working on it for a few years now, but this is he once in the 80s had some of the biggest quarterback contracts in the league, and now he's got it again. But yeah, Cabot is really the guy that is perceived as being the driver behind the Mahomes camp. And I mean, this is his, first really truly big quarterback and big deal. And he's been getting more and more. I mean, he's got a handful of other quarterbacks and other players that they're landing. So, and I think you're only going to see that more. I mean, Chris Cabot is the probably next superstar agent, because you win a deal like this and every 21-year-old coming out of college going to want to go with the guy that got Mahomes $500 million.
Absolutely. Good Lord. It's just hard to hear that still. I think that Clark Hunt clearly, in the way that he's positioned and now that this franchise is positioned for the future, it's hard, it's rare to say this, that you just committed to spending $500 million. And I think he made out like a bandit in terms of future earnings and what this does for him.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about just raising the profile of the organization. I mean, it does that. I mean, you certainly, nobody can hang, cheap on the Chiefs or small market Chiefs. I mean, this is not that. He's showed his willingness to get the deal done. And, this is absolutely going to help I think the Chiefs down the road, because money is still over a factor over everything else. But when the money is equal, where's the team going to go? Where's the player going to go to? They're going to go to where they can win. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes is going to help you win. So this is going to help them continue to attract talent. The fact that other players are going to know that Patrick Mahomes is going to be there for 12 years makes it easier. So if you're a receiver or you're a tackle, if you're even on defense, you're coming to play with Patrick Mahomes, it's not a case of you don't know if he's going to be there in 2 years. Right. Patrick Mahomes is going to be there for the rest of your life.
Yeah, there are kids going to college this year that have plans to end up in Kansas City.
Exactly.
And that's, you can't ever argue with that. I know that you are a man in high demand, so I will call that for a day, but thank you for your time. We appreciate you coming back.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thanks a lot.